Naomi had been away for 8 long years, working as a nurse in London. Every night after her shifts, she dreamed about home, the mango tree in the yard, her mother's laughter, the sound of rain on the old roof. When she finally saved enough money, she decided to rebuild the family house in Accra. The old place had been falling apart since her parents passed, but Naomi poured her heart into restoring it. Fresh paint on the walls, new furniture, bright curtains that let sunlight dance through the rooms. When it was done, it didn't just look like a house. It felt like love made visible. Out of kindness, she invited her younger sister, Linda, and Linda's husband, Kwame, to stay for a while. They'd been struggling after losing their rental, and Naomi thought, why not? Family should help each other. At first, it was wonderful. The house was alive again. Music in the evenings, shared dinners, everyone laughing around the table. Naomi finally felt that after years abroad, she was home again. But soon, something began to feel off. Linda started acting as if the house belonged to her. She would move furniture around without asking, change the curtains Naomi had just hung, and talk to visitors like she was the owner. Sometimes Naomi would come home from work to find Linda giving orders. Put that chair there, or don't touch my plants. Naomi tried to brush it off, telling herself it was just excitement. But deep down, she felt something shifting, the warmth of family slowly turning into a quiet unease. Months passed, and the happy atmosphere that once filled Naomi's home slowly disappeared. The laughter around the dinner table turned into small arguments and cold silence. Linda had changed. She no longer acted like a guest. She behaved like the owner. She started complaining about everything Naomi did. "Why do you cook like that?" she would say with a smirk. "You've lived abroad too long. You've forgotten real Ghanaian food." Naomi would just smile weakly and say nothing. She didn't want to fight. She kept reminding herself, family is family. Maybe she's just stressed. But Linda's attitude only got worse. She began speaking to the neighbors, as if the house belonged to her. One afternoon, Naomi overheard her telling a woman next door, "Oh yes, this is our home. My sister just helps with the bills." Naomi's heart dropped. It felt like someone had stolen not just her words, but her place. Even Kwame joined in, telling people, "We manage this house now. Naomi just stays here." The arrogance in his tone burned Naomi inside, but she bit her tongue. She tried to keep peace, cooked for them, paid the utility bills, even gave them space. But the more she gave, the more they took. Linda began ordering her around like a servant. "Naomi, wash these dishes. Naomi, don't leave your shoes there." It was no longer her home. It was their stage, and she had become the audience. Then one night, everything changed. Naomi was heading to bed when she heard voices coming from the living room. She paused at the corner of the hallway. Linda's voice was low but sharp. "Naomi's too soft," she whispered. "If she wants to leave, let her. We can handle this place without her." Kwame chuckled. "She won't do anything. She's too nice." The words hit Naomi like a slap. She stood frozen, the walls around her suddenly unfamiliar. The house she rebuilt with love had become a place of whispers and betrayal. She quietly stepped back to her room, her heart pounding. Lying awake in the dark, she replayed those words again and again. Too soft. Maybe they were right. She had been too soft, too patient, too forgiving. She thought being kind meant keeping peace. But now she saw how easily kindness could be mistaken for weakness. That night, for the first time, Naomi didn't cry. She just stared at the ceiling and promised herself one thing, that she would never let anyone use her heart or her home like this again. Something inside her had quietly shifted, not anger, not hatred, but strength. The kind that grows when you finally realize you've had enough. One Saturday afternoon, Naomi invited a close friend from work, Esther, to visit. She hadn't had anyone over in months, and thought maybe a friendly face would brighten things up. Naomi prepared jollof rice and chilled some juice, wanting everything to feel warm and welcoming. But the moment Esther stepped into the living room, Linda's attitude ruined it. She pointed at the couch and said sharply, "Don't sit there, that's my chair." The room went quiet. Esther froze for a second, glancing at Naomi in confusion. Naomi forced a small smile, her face burning with embarrassment. "It's fine, sit anywhere you like," she said softly, pretending nothing happened. But the damage was done. Esther stayed polite, though her eyes said everything. She couldn't believe how Naomi was being treated in her own home. After her friend left, Naomi sat alone for a long time, staring at the empty glass on the table. Her hands were trembling slightly. She kept asking herself, when did I lose control of my own house? A week later, she gathered the courage to talk to Linda. "I think we should start sharing the bills," Naomi began carefully. "The water, the electricity, it's getting expensive." But Linda laughed out loud. "You want us to pay in your family home? That's greedy, Naomi. How can you charge your own sister?" Kwame joined in, shaking his head. "You've changed since you came back. Everything's about money with you now." Naomi sat quietly, her chest tight. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. The house that she rebuilt with her life saving. They were living in it for free, yet they called her greedy. Days later came the final straw. Naomi came home early from her shift, exhausted, and as she reached the gate, she heard voices shouting inside. Linda's voice rose above the rest. "If you don't like staying here, you can leave." Naomi stopped cold. For a moment, she thought she'd misheard. But then she heard it again, clearer this time, her sister yelling as if she owned the place. Naomi didn't move. She stood outside the door, her heart sinking. The very walls she painted, the furniture she bought, the home she built from love, all of it had been turned against her. That night, Naomi didn't sleep. She sat at her desk, quietly opening the drawer where she kept her documents. One by one, she pulled them out, the land title, the renovation receipts, the ownership papers, her name printed clearly on each one. She read them carefully, slowly, as if drawing strength from the ink itself. These weren't just papers anymore. They were her armor, proof of everything she had worked for and everything she refused to lose again. For the first time in months, Naomi's tears didn't come from pain. They came from clarity. Something inside her had finally broken, but maybe that break was exactly what she needed to begin standing tall again. After that night, Naomi changed, quietly, completely. She didn't argue anymore. She stopped defending herself, or trying to prove anything. When Linda made her usual sharp comments, Naomi just smiled politely and walked away. When Kwame bragged to neighbors about their house, Naomi didn't correct him. From the outside, it looked like she had given up. But inside, she was planning her next move. Her silence wasn't weakness anymore. It was strategy. One morning, Naomi took a day off work and went to see a lawyer named Mrs. Adu, an older woman known for handling family property disputes. Sitting across from her, Naomi spoke in a calm, steady voice. "I want to protect my peace legally," she said. Mrs. Adu listened carefully, reviewed the documents Naomi brought, the land title, the renovation receipts, everything. After a few minutes, she looked up and said, "Your name is the only one on these papers. That means full ownership. You have every right to take your home back." Hearing those words felt like a deep breath after months of suffocation. They began filing the paperwork that same day, a formal notice of possession and eviction. Naomi didn't feel anger. She felt relief. It was like the house itself had been waiting for her to finally stand up for. Back at home, Naomi started moving quietly. She began packing her valuables into boxes, her mother's jewelry, family photographs, important documents, anything she didn't want lost or damaged. She moved the boxes into a small storage unit near her workplace. She did it all slowly, carefully, so Linda wouldn't notice. To everyone else, it looked like Naomi was withdrawing. Linda even laughed about it to the neighbors. "She's leaving soon," she said loudly one morning. "Guess she finally realized who really runs this place." The neighbors chuckled awkwardly, but Naomi didn't respond. She just smiled, said good morning, and carried on sweeping the porch like nothing had happened. But behind that calm face, Naomi's mind was sharper than ever. Every word Linda said, every insult, every mockery, Naomi let it pass over her like water. Because now, she knew something Linda didn't. She had already started the process that would legally remove them both from her house. At night, when the house grew quiet, Naomi sat in her room, checking her documents once more, making sure everything was in order. She wasn't driven by revenge, she was driven by peace. For the first time in months, she slept soundly. Linda mistook Naomi's silence for surrender, but she had no idea what was coming. Naomi's stillness now wasn't weakness. It was power waiting for the right moment to move. She had stopped fighting with words, because she was preparing to win with action. It was a bright, quiet morning when the letter arrived. The envelope was white, crisp, and official-looking, addressed simply to current occupants. Linda picked it up from the gate, thinking it was just another utility bill. But as soon as she saw the lawyer's seal on the front, her smile faded. She tore it open and started reading, and with every line, her face went pale. "Eviction notice?" she whispered, her hands shaking. "What is this?" Naomi was sitting at the dining table, calmly sipping her morning tea. She didn't even look surprised. Linda stormed in, waving the paper. "Naomi, what is this nonsense? You're evicting us?" Naomi looked up, her voice soft but firm. "You once told me, if you don't like staying here, you can leave." She set her cup down gently and met her sister's furious eyes. "So I'm leaving, but so are you." Linda's mouth opened in disbelief. "You can't do this to family," she shouted. "We're your blood." Before Naomi could respond, Kwame walked in, his tone full of mockery and anger. "Naomi, you've really lost your mind. Family doesn't sue family. You're embarrassing yourself." Naomi stayed perfectly calm, her face unreadable. "Family also doesn't insult you in your own home. Family doesn't mock the hands that fed them," she replied quietly. "You have 30 days to leave. The lawyer's notice is already filed." Kwame tried to laugh it off, calling her bluff, but his voice trembled slightly. He could see something different in Naomi now, something cold, unshakable. She wasn't yelling. She wasn't crying. She wasn't begging. She was calm, too calm, and that scared them more than anything. Linda started pacing, tears filling her eyes. "You're heartless," she snapped. "After everything we've been through together." Naomi interrupted softly. "Yes, after everything. That's why I can't do it anymore." She stood up, her posture tall and steady. "I rebuilt this house out of love, and I let it turn into a battlefield. But not anymore. I'm choosing peace, even if that means choosing distance." The silence that followed was heavy. For once, Linda didn't have a comeback. The only sound was the ticking of the wall clock and the faint clinking of Naomi's teaspoon as she stirred her tea. Kwame slammed the eviction notice onto the table and muttered under his breath, "You'll regret that." Naomi gave a small, calm smile. "No," she said, looking him straight in the eye. "I regret not doing it sooner." From that day, the house changed. The usual noise and bickering vanished. Meals were eaten in silence. Doors closed quietly. No laughter, no shouting, just the thick, uneasy quiet of people who suddenly realized the roof over their heads was no longer there. And in the center of that silence sat Naomi, steady, peaceful, and unbothered, finally reclaiming not just her home, but her power. The very next day, Linda went into full panic mode. Instead of packing or trying to make peace, she grabbed her phone and started calling every relative she could think of. Her voice was dramatic, full of tears and anger. "Can you believe it?" she cried. "Naomi is kicking us out. Her own sister. We have nowhere to go." She made herself sound helpless and Naomi like a monster. Soon, Naomi's phone began buzzing nonstop. Aunties, cousins, even distant relatives she hadn't spoken to in years started calling. One cousin said, "Naomi, how can you do this? She's your blood." Another scolded her, "You're too proud now. That's not how family behaves." Each call came with guilt wrapped in judgment. Naomi listened quietly, her tone calm and steady. "I gave them my home, my peace, and my years," she said softly each time. "I'm just taking one back." Some hung up angrily, others sighed as if she'd disappointed them. But for once, Naomi didn't let their words sink into her heart. She'd done enough. Meanwhile, the gossip started spreading through the neighborhood like wildfire. People whispered at the market, at church, even outside her gate. Some sided with Linda, shaking their heads. "Naomi has changed since she went abroad," they said. Others quietly admired her courage. "She's right," one woman told another. "People will walk all over you if you let them." Linda and Kwame, desperate to win sympathy, went door to door telling their side of the story. They painted Naomi as cold and cruel, saying she threw them out just to show off her success. But the neighbors who had seen the way Linda treated Naomi before knew better. They'd witnessed the shouting, the bossy tone, the way Linda always acted like the house belonged to her. So when Naomi passed by, people greeted her kindly, but carefully, some out of respect, others out of quiet admiration. At home, Naomi didn't waste energy defending herself. She had no interest in fighting rumors or proving her innocence. She focused on herself, on peace, on quiet, on healing. She cooked her meals, went to work, and returned home to silence that no longer felt heavy. For the first time in months, the house was calm. That night, she sat on her porch with a cup of tea, the evening breeze brushing against her face. She could still hear faint whispers from nearby houses, but she didn't care anymore. The world could say what it wanted. She finally felt free. When she went to bed, she fell asleep quickly and deeply, without replaying arguments in her mind, without worrying who might call next. For the first time in a very long time, Naomi slept through the night, not because everything was perfect, but because she had finally chosen herself. 30 days passed faster than anyone expected. The morning of the deadline arrived, bright, quiet, and heavy with tension. Naomi woke up early, her heart calm but firm. She didn't feel joy or revenge, just a strange stillness inside her. She brewed a cup of tea and sat on the porch, watching as the sun rose over the yard she had once planted flowers in with her mom. Today was the day her peace would finally return. Around mid-morning, a moving truck pulled up outside the gate. The sound of its engine broke the silence. Linda and Kwame came out, looking tired and bitter. Boxes and suitcases were piled near the door. Linda muttered angrily under her breath as she walked past Naomi, not daring to look her in the eye. "Ungrateful," she whispered. "After all we've been through, this is how you treat us." Naomi didn't answer. She just sipped her tea slowly, her gaze steady on the street ahead. Kwame gave orders to the movers, his tone sharp and full of pride he didn't really feel. When everything was almost packed, he turned toward Naomi, trying one last time to wound her. "You'll regret this," he said coldly. "One day, you'll realize you pushed family away." Naomi met his eyes, her voice calm but powerful. "No," she said. "I regret not doing it sooner." Her words hit harder than anger ever could. Kwame looked away, pretending not to care, but his silence said it all. Linda stood there for a moment, her eyes glassy but defiant, before turning to grab the last of her bags. As the movers loaded the final box and the truck door slammed shut, Naomi stood up slowly. She followed them to the gate, not to rush them, just to see them off. Linda didn't say goodbye. Kwame didn't either. The gate creaked open, and for a brief second, Naomi looked at them, the sister she once loved so deeply and the man who had turned her home into chaos. Then, the gate closed with a soft metallic click that sounded like both an ending and a beginning. Naomi stood there for a moment, listening. The silence that followed was unlike any she'd ever known. It wasn't cold or empty, it was peaceful. She walked back to the porch and sat down again, the same cup of tea now warm in her hands. She took a deep breath and exhaled slowly, a sound that carried both grief and relief. Inside, the house felt different. The walls seemed to breathe easier, the air lighter, the energy calm. The insults, the shouting, the tension, all of it was gone. Only the soft hum of the ceiling fan and the chirping of birds outside filled the space now. Naomi looked around the home she had built with her own hand. For the first time in years, it truly felt like hers again. And as she leaned back, eyes closed, a small smile formed on her face, quiet, free, and full of peace. After Linda and Kwame left, the house finally fell silent. For days, Naomi just rested. No noise, no arguments, no one demanding her energy. But even in the calm, she felt something heavy sitting in her chest. The house was peaceful, yet her heart was still tired. One evening, she stood by the window watching the sunset and whispered to herself, "I need a break, not just from people, but from everything." A week later, Naomi packed a small bag and took a trip to Cape Coast. The moment she arrived, the ocean breeze touched her face like a soft blessing. She rented a small beach cottage, simple, quiet, and close enough to hear the waves crash every morning. Each day, she walked along the shore barefoot, letting the sand and salt water wash away the weight she had carried for years. In the mornings, Naomi would sit by the window with a notebook and start writing. Page after page, she poured her heart out, the pain of betrayal, the guilt of saying no, the loneliness that came with choosing peace. She wrote about how easily love can turn into control when boundaries disappear, and how silence can either break you or build you. The more she wrote, the lighter she felt. Her pen became her therapy, her voice, her healing. At night, she'd listen to the waves and talk to God in whispers. "Thank you," she'd say, "for teaching me to choose myself without shame." For the first time in years, she didn't feel alone. She felt whole. After 2 weeks, Naomi returned to Accra with new energy and a softer heart. The house no longer felt like a reminder of what she'd lost. It felt like a symbol of what she'd reclaimed. She rearranged the furniture, opened the windows wide, and filled the rooms with music and laughter again, her own laughter this time. One afternoon, while she was cooking, her phone rang. It was her lawyer, Mrs. Adu. "Naomi," she said warmly, "I just wanted to confirm. The full legal possession has been finalized. The property is officially under your sole ownership." Naomi smiled, her eyes watering a little. "Thank you, Mrs. Adu," she said softly. "It's not just a house anymore. I finally own my peace." After that, Naomi decided to do something meaningful with her experience. She began volunteering at a women's empowerment center nearby. She listened to stories from women who struggled to say no, who gave everything to others and forgot themselves in the process. She shared her own story, not with bitterness, but with hope. "You can love people and still protect your peace," she told them. "That's not selfish, that's survival." As weeks passed, Naomi's pain turned into purpose. She was no longer just the woman who endured quietly. She was the woman who healed intentionally. And every morning when she watered the flowers in her yard, she smiled, because the peace she fought for had finally bloomed inside her. Months passed, and Naomi's life slowly returned to peace. She had her routines now: work, volunteering, morning tea on the porch. The house felt lighter, full of calm energy and quiet joy. She'd almost stopped thinking about Linda and Kwame. But one rainy afternoon, there was a knock at the gate, soft, hesitant, almost trembling. Naomi opened it, and there stood Linda. She looked nothing like the woman who had once walked out of the house so proudly. Her clothes were wrinkled, her hair unkempt, and her eyes red from crying. She gave a weak smile that quickly faded. "Naomi," she said in a shaky voice, "please, can we talk?" Naomi didn't say anything for a few seconds. She simply stepped aside and let her in. Linda sat at the edge of the couch, her hands clasped tightly, like she was holding her last bit of pride together. "I know I hurt you," she began softly. "I was wrong. About everything." She explained how after they were evicted, things went downhill. Kwame couldn't keep a steady job, and they kept arguing until he finally left. Debts piled up, and Linda had been moving from one friend's house to another. "I have nowhere left to go," she said, tears spilling down her face. "Please, just for a week. Let me stay here while I figure things out." Naomi's heart ached. This was still her sister, The same girl she had shared childhood memories with, laughed with, cried with. But she also remembered the pain, the disrespect, the nights she cried in silence under this same roof. She took a deep breath and spoke gently, her voice steady and kind. "Linda," she said, "forgiveness, yes. Shelter, no." Linda looked up, shocked. "What? You're really turning me away?" Naomi nodded slowly. "I forgive you, but I can't open this door again, not like before. It's not revenge, it's a boundary. I worked too hard to rebuild my peace. I can't let it break again." She reached into a drawer and pulled out a small envelope, placing it in Linda's hand. "This is for you. It's enough to rent a room and buy food for a while. But this time," Naomi added softly, "learn to build what you destroy." Linda sat frozen, staring at the envelope. She wanted to argue, to defend herself, but the words wouldn't come. For the first time, she saw Naomi not as her sister to lean on, but as a woman who had learned her worth. After a long silence, Linda stood up. "Thank you," she whispered, voice cracking. I understand." Naomi walked her to the gate. The rain had stopped, but the air still smelled of storm. As Linda stepped out, she turned once more, eyes full of regret, and then walked away slowly. Naomi watched until she disappeared down the road. There was no anger, no satisfaction, just quiet acceptance. She closed the gate gently, feeling the same peace she had fought so hard to protect. Some lessons, she knew, come only through loss. And Linda had finally learned that arrogance built on dependency always collapses, just like a house built on sand. A year passed, and Naomi's life looked completely different. The house that once echoed with shouting and tension now felt like a safe, warm home. Flowers bloomed in the garden again, laughter returned to her evenings, and her heart finally felt light. She had turned her pain into purpose. One Saturday afternoon, Naomi stood at the front of a small community hall. The banner behind her read, "Love doesn't mean losing yourself." Women of all ages filled the seats, some holding notebooks, others just listening with tearful eyes. Naomi spoke softly but with strength. Every word carried experience. She told them about giving too much, about mistaking patience for peace, and about learning the hard way that kindness without limits can become a cage. She didn't speak with anger or bitterness. Instead, she spoke with grace. "I used to believe love meant staying silent," she said. "But now I know love can exist alongside boundaries." The room stayed silent except for the sound of sniffles and soft claps. A young woman in the front row whispered, "You gave me courage." Naomi smiled, her heart swelling. She had once felt small in her own home. Now she was helping others find their voices. Later that evening, Naomi returned home. The sun was setting, painting the sky gold and orange. She stood at her gate, looking at the house, the same place where she once cried herself to sleep, now glowing softly in peace. She whispered to herself, "Peace isn't given, it's reclaimed." As the camera panned upward, the scene felt timeless. The home no longer a battleground, but a sanctuary built on strength, lessons, and quiet pride. Naomi smiled one last time before walking inside. Finally free, finally whole.